What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler. We come to you each and every week to talk to you about the business of Moto. Guests in the industry that have done incredible things, guests in the industry that are building incredible things, and sometimes even special guests from outside the industry that can bring you some incredible knowledge to help you build your Moto career. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Nesler. We got a great guest for you today, but before we dive into the show, I want to say thanks to a couple of those folks that support the show. Number one, 100%, our friends over there, a supporter of our program and what we're doing here. And obviously, you know the name, you love the product. They're an unprecedented global leader in moto goggles, but they make a lot more than that these days. Mountain bike gear, helmets, protection, sport performance glasses, technical fleeces and jackets, premium t-shirts, anything you need to look good, feel good, be protected on the track or the trail. They've got it covered. They're a big supporter of my e-bike team that we've put together, and I really appreciate their support for that. You can check out all of their product at 100%. That's 100%.com. Also, we couldn't do the show without RacerX, so thanks to all the folks at RacerX. Be sure to go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing to renew, subscribe, see what promotion that they have going on this month. My guest today is somebody that I've wanted to have on for some time, and I picked probably the worst time possible to try to get her on. It's when she's the busiest of all year, but she made it happen, and I'm really appreciative. We've got Kristen Beat with us today, and I'm just a fan of her work, and I think it's unique, and her story and journey, I'm sure, is extremely unique and interesting, and I just wanted to have her come on and talk about that. So, Kristen, welcome to the show. I appreciate you making time for our tiny little podcast. When you got so much stuff going on, it means a lot.
Oh, anytime. And I'm sad that we weren't able to get together sooner. The season has just been a whirlwind. Having grown up in motocross, I think a lot of people think that, it's been like a really easy adjustment. I'm probably the most primed and ready for this as anyone could ever be. But at the same time, like the travel and the amount of time that we put into these shows, there's been a learning curve. So yeah. I appreciate you being patient.
Yeah, of course. Well, let's jump in. I told you before we came on, I'm a fan of your work. And I just selfishly have questions about your journey and things like that. So I thought it would just unpack the most naturally if we waited and went through that on this show. I always like to ask the guests that haven't been on the show before, just talk to us about how we got started in the sport of moto. Were you always involved? Were you just a fan from afar? Did you just get a unique opportunity to take a crack at this sport? Walk us through your introduction into the sport of moto.
Yeah, honestly, I am getting older, so I feel like every time I'm asked that question, everything gets a little fuzzy. So I'm like, can we just start 5 years ago? But now I have to remember, I've been in it a long time. So my brother actually was an amateur and then a professional racer. He was a fill-in rider for the Kawasaki. And I was just always around it growing up, but not in the same capacity that I think a lot of families were. My family was more scholastically based. So we didn't homeschool. My parents had both my brother and I going to school full time. So when they were traveling with Ryan, if he had to go out of school, I would stay with, family, grandparents at home and still attend school. And I'd only go to a few of my brother's races, maybe a year, just because on weekends, I kind of had my own life. I was a collegiate and a high school swimmer. I kind of had my own thing going on. I surfed a lot, and I always loved motocross, though. I always loved Supercross and motocross. I was a huge fan. And in college, I was getting my degree in pre-law at the time. My goal was to graduate and then go to law school. And at the time, I wanted to start working with Wasserman Media Group some way, somehow, because they were based out of Carlsbad. They were like the cool sports management firm to work for. They still are. They're awesome. And so I saw that through Wasserman Media Group, one of their properties at the time was motocross.com. So they had an opening for an internship. And I kind of thought, well, A, I'd be able to hang out with my brother and my dad, who are awesome, every weekend because they would require traveling to the races and doing interviews. B, I'd get great written experience. So, a law degree encompasses a lot of writing, and I'd be able to be right there in the Wasserman office and hopefully then put myself in position to be one of their legal interns down the road. So I went ahead and interviewed with Brendan Lutz at the time. And he brought me on to motocross.com. And at that time, like I was a freshman in college. This was even, a lot of times college students don't get internships until their junior, senior year. I already was like thinking, okay, I need to line myself up with Wasserman now. So when it's time to get a good internship, I'm right there. So I took the opportunity and I started kind of moving down that journalism road. And it just so happened, I ended up really enjoying it and kind of telling the stories. And then I got a call from Fuel TV just out of the blue randomly. They said, hey, we have a girl who usually covers our freestyle motocross events. She can't do it for us. We know you're a writer with motocross.com. Like, we think you're hot. Can you come up and do it? That's all we care about.
That's where I remember you from. I was like, where did I see Kristen first? And it was Fuel TV. I was like, maybe it was Arena Cross. It was way back in the Fuel TV days. Way back when. And like awesome. At the time when I got the call, I literally was like, no, y'all, like, that's not for me. I'm going to law school. I was trying to like drop that, like, hey, like I'm educated. I'm going that route. I'm not going to be the 32nd board girl. They then told me how much it paid. And mind you, I'm a poor college student. And I was like, oh, yep, I'll see you guys there. What time? Tell me when, say less. Like, I'm there. Yeah.
So here I am in college driving up to Temecula for this freestyle, motocross event. I cover it, and mind you, I do not like talking. To me, the entertainment factor of journalism isn't for me. It still isn't. It makes me nervous. I'm kind of uncomfortable. But the storytelling was really fun. And I liked being able to share the stories that had meaning behind it, that kind of made you feel something, because that's why I wanted to get into law. I wanted to help athletes. I wanted to be able to, and because, my brother's experiences in racing weren't entirely great. Like, he was one of the riders that didn't make it. And I wish that he would have had better management during his time, because I think that his life would have been very different had he had better management. Now he races off-road trucks now. He's just such a go-getter. My brother's awesome. But it was one of those things where when I was watching him throughout that experience, and then I also kind of had the stick and ball background, I compared it to baseball, basketball, football, and there's just such a better kind of amateur process for those guys. And back then, before they had Supercross Futures or that huge program, there needed to be management. So I wanted to step into that. But then I kind of found out through the journalism side, by telling stories, I could also serve the same purpose by enlightening people, by growing the sport in a way that it also appealed to the stick and ball people that have always kind of resisted two-wheel racing as being, non-competitive, because you're on a machine versus, your own body system. So after covering that Fuel TV event, I kind of started sitting back and I was like, could I do this full time? And I asked myself that a few times. Then finally I was just like, maybe this is the route I go. So out of college, then I got a job with NASCAR. I worked with NASCAR for a few years. I moved up to Michigan and I started covering stick and ball sports. I also did local news, which was fun. And then from my experience in Michigan, I got a call from Michael Prince at Feld. He goes, hey, I know you have a background in racing. Would you want to come cover the Arena Cross series? And I was a little bit hesitant because I wasn't sure if that was a step I wanted to take. Like, I was covering MSU football. Like, I wasn't sure if Arena Cross was,
is that a step
the
sideways?
next step.
Back? Yeah, right. Yeah.
But then I was told I could do them both at the same time. So I didn't have to quit my job in Michigan. I killed myself for 2 years, and I would do morning news from Monday to Friday. I would drive from Lansing, Michigan to Detroit Friday nights. I would fly out to wherever the Arena Cross race was that weekend for 2 years. I would fly back on Sunday, and at Monday be in the newsroom at 4 a.m. again, covering sports.
So you ended up in traditional sports television, right? Without a broadcast degree. So is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
So can we go back and talk about, like, how did you, cause I worked when I was in college, I worked, in the producer's room, in TV, and I watched I watched their journey of going through broadcast journalism, getting that job, signing a contract, making no money for 4 years, signing another contract, making a little bit over no money for 4 years, but they all had a broadcast degree. And here you are, somebody that is extremely intelligent. Not that broadcast students aren't, they are. You're going to go to law school, and here you are, you get an opportunity at a very prestigious television station covering Michigan sports. how, like, I guess just briefly touch on that. How did that come to be? And were you wanting to get away from the action sports side of it, or did it just kind of happen?
Yeah. So, my trajectory is not normal by any means. Like, my actual degree from college was psychology in communications.
Okay.
And that was like and then my minor was in pre-law. So all of my pre-law courses were like business law. I did real estate law, sort of in your undergraduate program. If you want to go law, you'll take like a pre-law minor. There is no law major at most universities. So like your pre-law will touch on every kind of law. And then when you go to graduate school, you'll like specify what kind of law you want to be in, which I wanted to be in sports and contractual law and management. But anyway, so from my communications degree, before I even graduated college, I accepted a job with NASCAR, and it seems kind of silly. I was one of the Miss Sprint Cups, but I took that job because it paid really well and I could pay off all my college loans in like one fell swoop. And it was, I was recruited by a modeling agency to do that job. But what enticed me to take it was the fact that I would have TV time on Fox Sports, and at that time, Speed Vision, because Miss Sprint Cup did, driver interviews during the week. You were able to attend all the races. It was just like a great catapult and catalyst. From there, I had developed a good enough reel. So by like reel, you mean like a demo. And I had a lot of interviews with, NASCAR drivers. So I kind of hurt myself by being a part of that program in some ways, because I wasn't seen as a serious journalist anymore. So I was like, okay, how do I get my street cred back? So I started pitching myself with my demo to local news groups, and I was given an opportunity to audition with a few different local markets, right? So I had an audition in Philadelphia, I had an audition in Tampa, I auditioned in Seattle, Washington, I auditioned in Dallas, Texas, but they all wanted me to do morning news. They didn't want me to do sports because I'm a girl. You don't want a girl to come in and do sports. That's generally the case for most major markets. Like if you're a girl, you have to work in that newsroom for years and years to get an opportunity.
Right.
So Little Lansing, Michigan, this little Fox/NBC duopoly up there, was probably one of the lowest markets that gave me an audition, but they said, we'll allow you to do morning news and sports, but then your workday is going to be like a 12-hour workday. And they offered me that, and I kind of was like, okay, I get to do sports. Sounds good. So I would wake up in the morning and I'd go and do morning news. And then after that, I'd start cutting sports for the evening show. And then I'd also, the next day, do in the morning news on this Fox NBC duopoly. I'd do sports for the NBC side, and then I'd host the morning show for the Fox show. So yeah, I stretched myself really thin.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because at first you kind of just bounced right over it. And knowing enough about the TV industry, I knew like it runs really deep right there. And that story, like, it's awesome to hear that, because I really want everybody that listens to this, that maybe just sees you, on Race Day Live and then on the broadcast, and you're just a piece of what they're watching. But what I really want people to understand with like your story today is, to get the opportunity that you have and the opportunities that you've gotten, you have had to make some massive sacrifices and bust your ass. And that story alone, just like what you had to do to get the sports job, and it's incredible. And I know it doesn't stop there. So from there, this is when you start doing the job in Michigan, and then you're also, I guess moonlighting, kind of doing the arena cross in addition, right? Is that when you start to be in two places at once type of thing?
Yeah, so like 6 months into my job in Michigan, I get the call from Michael Prince, and they're like, do you want to do arena cross? So, I was working 7 days a week. I was still doing morning news. I was also doing sports for the NBC. I started doing arena cross. And there were times when like if my flight got delayed, or like we couldn't get me a flight out of where the arena cross race was, I would be driving straight from Detroit to the airport, and I'd lie to my news director and say I was just feeling sick and I'd be 15 minutes late, but I would pull an all-nighter and drive from Detroit back to Lansing to be in the news desk Monday morning. And I can't remember how many times I remember like having a Red Bull and like looking at the weather girl that I worked with and being like, I don't know how I'm here. Like, I don't know how I got here, because I was so tired.
Wow.
but yeah, and then eventually from there, I started getting opportunities at the Fox Sports Detroit, which was like the bigger subsidiary.
Okay.
And they said, hey, we've got a girl out. Can your sports girl come in and fill in? My director would have to approve it, but I'd get to go and fill in at a Wings game or at a Pistons game or at a Detroit Lions game. And wow. I got all these really cool kind of opportunities to fill in for people. And I started gaining traction in traditional sports, which I still love. And I really do love football, baseball, basketball. But my heart was always really, and it sounds crazy. I like Daniel Blair, Daniel Blair. Mm-hmm. We've always had conversations about this, but I chose Supercross. I chose two-wheel racing. And so even, 4 years ago when the NBC deal was kind of coming into play, Feld had reached out to me and said, we, might want to pull you up from Arena Cross and we might want you to do our Supercross sideline. And I'd done the Monster Cup. So I knew I was on the bench for them. But that same year I had an opportunity with the LA Kings hockey team to be their rinkside reporter. And the contract was sitting on the table and Feld said, we need another few weeks. So I actually turned down the contract with the LA Kings hockey team to even have the chance or to be still considered with Supercross because LA Kings needed an answer today. And Feld, didn't decide until late December that I wasn't the direction they were going to go in. So, I've sacrificed a lot, absolutely, to even just be in this position. But at the same time, I think had I been chosen at that time, I wouldn't have been ready. Yeah. Like, I think all of the time in the hallway, all of the time kind of on the bench makes you more prepared, more mature. You're older, so you naturally kind of fit into the group better of your coworkers. And I think everything kind of happens for a reason. And then this past year, I got the call from Feld and they said, hey, do you want to come in and do race day live? And I actually, so crazy story, I turned it down at first because I didn't want to, give up Arena Cross. I love Arena Cross. And I had kind of put together like this, and I still have, and I'm still like knocking on wood, like, how did this happen? I've put together this dream schedule of being able to do Arena Cross, being able to do American Flat Track, and then Enduro Cross. I filled my season every weekend with racing. I get 3 days off a week. So I get like a 3-day weekend every week. And I'm traveling and I'm getting to cover two-wheel racing. And when Feld called, I would have had to give up American Flat Track and Arena Cross. So just because of the way that, weekends worked out. And so I had to turn it down. It gutted me. Like, dude, for like a week, I was like at home thinking like, did I make the wrong decision? What am I doing? But then I kept telling myself, well, that's not really the position that I want in Supercross anyway. So maybe this is just bad timing. And if I'm good enough down the road, they'll still consider me. And like, I still love everyone at Feld. And I was like, they're like family to me. So if it's meant to be down the road, it'll happen. Well, 2 months later, they give me a call again and they're like, hey, we'll let you miss 2 rounds. That'll allow you to keep doing American Flat Track if you can come back and do Supercross. And so I was able to do the first 4 rounds of Arena Cross, move straight into Supercross. And then now I'll be missing like 2 of the Supercross rounds to do American Flat Track, and American Flat Track is allowing me to miss 1. Yeah. And then I'll, kind of move my season forward that way. So we've kind of worked out this perfect deal, but it's not coincidence at all. It was like a lot of hard negotiation and people being like, Feld has been so supportive of me in the past, and they've established a great platform for me. And like, that's so rare in sports for like a company or even a network to, we're disposable, right? We're all in the hallway. There's 15 people who want this job, whether it be just to cover motocross or whether it be to be on TV. There's a lot of people who want a position on a network, on a major network. So for them to be able to say, hey, we're going to allow you to miss a few because we want to support you and encourage you in your pursuit of what you want to do in racing. Yeah, it was just super cool. So everything had to come together just right, and it did.
Talk to me about your interview style, because that, I keep saying, like, I'm a big fan of yours and your work. That is where you've caught my attention a long time ago. And as I grew and matured, I realized that's why I like Kristen Beat doing what she does. And it's your interview style. And there's been a couple times this year that there's just such a difference between you and the other folks in the sport that do this, whether they fill in for you or people of the past. They're all great, but your style is so different. It's, I guess to me, it feels when you're having a conversation with somebody, whether it's like a Cooper Webb or a Roger DeCosta or an Eli Tomac, it's a conversation. It's not an interview. And I guess that's the easiest way for me to, dumb it down and explain it. I don't feel like you're a sports broadcaster asking sports broadcaster scripted questions. I feel like I'm sitting next to a friend that knows a lot about this person, and you guys are just having a conversation. And I can see the reaction that you get from those people that you are having that conversation with. It's almost like their guard comes down a little bit more and they're more relaxed because they don't maybe feel like they're being interviewed. I don't know if that makes sense or if that's intentional and like that's my style. But can you, was that something you had to develop, or was that just naturally, this is why I'm good at what I do type of a thing?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you noticing that. I have gotten that feedback from a few people and it feels good. For me though, it's just genuine. Sure. A lot of people, even younger folks will ask me or DM me hey, how do you prep questions or how do you do this? And for me, questions are, and I hate to say it, that it just comes easy to me. That's the easy part of the show. Mm-hmm. And it's so crazy to me because to me that I do put a high emphasis on questions because I think when you're watching a broadcast show and I come from all that I've done, I kind of have a producer brain now and I like producing segments. So that's one of the big things that I've kind of tried to do on Race Day Live is have a hand in the editorial content. They don't always listen to me, but sometimes we try. So one of the things for me is questions are not a throwaway. That is to me, one of the pinnacles because I can tell a story until I'm blue in the face, but I want to hear from the writers. Sure. I want to hear what they have to say because that to me is the pinnacle storytelling, but not all the time do we get good answers out of the writers. And I've personally been insulted when people have said, we can't get anything good from the writers. And I sit back and I go, well, you're asking the wrong questions because each one of these individuals have an incredible story. And if you know how they tick, you'll get there. And that's my thing is it's not something that I think you can really game plan or strategize in the same way you might a report or you might try to set up an interview or anything like that. But just the question asking, I think, comes from knowing the writer's background. So if you know their story, you don't always have to ask about the track or what just happened. Mm. Sometimes asking them about the story is just as meaningful or impactful. So, perfect example, Christian Craig's story, I've had the opportunity to follow for years and years and years because he's from SoCal and so am I. And we just, our families knew each other. My brother used to ride with him. So knowing kind of the adversity that he's overcome, when he gets top of the board in qualifying, it means a little more because of how far he's come, right? So you can ask him about that and you can say hey, if you already know that that's kind of the story you want to go, hey, considering all that you've been through, a few years ago, you had a broken back and you were told you wouldn't walk again to now be top of the boards at qualifying in the third round, here in, San Diego or Anaheim, wherever we're at, for you, how meaningful is that? And does it mean a little bit more? I know it means a little bit more, but it sets him up to tell that story from his lens.
Sure.
So I think the question asking is more just knowing their story and looking at it through a compassionate lens. I don't really care how he got there. He's there. I think the big mistake is what did you find out there? Or how do you feel? If you really know the athlete, you kind of already know how they feel in that moment. What is behind that feeling is to me the interesting part. So I think it's just a natural curiosity. You can't always teach that, but I think that no matter what, being educated about the writer's background and their story is huge, and it helps you ask better questions.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely love your interview style and just the way you and Daniel work together. Daniel, in my opinion, has grown so much in the past couple of years, and it's really cool to watch you guys work as a team.
Daniel's a pro now. Dude, Daniel is so good. And Daniel's been a friend of mine forever. And I just have to give him props for a sec because he was the one who, when I was being considered for arena cross, he knew my brother from racing pit bikes because they did a pit bike tour because that's what was cool back then. Yeah. So he actually reached out to me and he kind of coached me my first year. And because like I said, I'd been around racing, but I wasn't one of the racer sisters that goes there every weekend. So I needed help on learning the riders, learning their history, learning the bikes, because the bikes are so different. In 4 years since my brother had been racing, the bikes had completely changed. So Daniel was right there coaching me step by step. And I think that's another kind of facet in how you get to, not that I'm anywhere big, but how you get to where I'm at is having a good mentor. And Daniel Blair was my mentor. So I really think that I had the best.
So Daniel is a rider that has had his own unique journey, and now he's in the journalism space, at least for part of his career. He's like got a two-headed monster at all times. You get the unique opportunity, you and everybody else on the TV crew, to work with these riders that, whether they're hurt like Adam and they fill in, or former professional greats like Zach Osborne, guys that have zero background in this other than they've just been on TV their entire professional career. Talk to us a little bit about some of the different experiences you've had with working people like Zach and Adam Cincerillo, and I think Brayton's done some stuff in the past. Is that cool for you to see these guys step in and be naturally talented, or maybe they struggle and you have to help them through the day? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, honestly, I don't do much helping because usually in those instances, I've been learning too. So we're both sitting here saying like, wait, why do we sound like we're whispering? Is there something wrong? Is it us? Is it them? What's going on? Like, so usually like I can't do much helping because I'm generally in the same position they're in. But it is very cool because I'm still a fan. So getting to work with Zach Osborne and Adam Cincerillo this year has been so cool because they go from being superheroes, which they are to me, to working right with me on the ground. It's very cool because they each offer such a unique perspective on the racing, and they are both, Adam Cincerillo is just so good. And I think that Zach Osborne still very much has his boots on the ground. And so he's one of those riders who can offer an insight of what it's like to race those guys. Mm-hmm. And he's raced, not saying anything. Ricky, phenomenal. But like he hasn't raced those guys recently. Like he doesn't know what it's like to go for a championship with Jason Anderson. Zach Osborne, Adam Cincerillo do. So having them on the floor to complement Ricky's expertise and history to this really recent take of what it's like and what they race like on track and what it's like to be behind the handlebars. And just how everything kind of flows together. It's really awesome to be able to work with those guys.
I think the makeup that we have right now in the sport, as far as our broadcast team that we get to enjoy week in and week out, even when it changes with Lee or with Todd, just having that mixture of someone like you that isn't just somebody that was in journalism, but you come from this sport, and then mixing in the professional riders that give a current take with, one of the greatest of all time, Ricky, and having Daniel that brings such a unique perspective. Like his journey was so different. It's hands down. I've been a fan of the sport since, 2000, 2002. It's my favorite makeup of a broadcast team. I think you guys do.
Thank you. That makes my heart happy to hear, because sometimes you hear like all these negative things, and that's our sport.
Our sport is they love to just hate. I have no idea how. This is a small podcast, but it gets like 15,000, 20,000 views a week.
A lot of people.
It's enough for me to think like I am going to get absolutely shit on in the comment sections, and I haven't, and I think it's because I don't talk about the sport. I just talk to professionals. That was one of my biggest fears, is because I see how people just attack. Like, I think you do a great job, and I know people attack you and Daniel and riders, and it's just, I think it's the nature of our sport. Has that been difficult for you as somebody that is literally, your job is to be in front of all of that? Has that been a challenge, or do you just kind of brush it off?
So I wish I could say I brush it off, but I don't. I know you and I texted about it after I filled in for NBC that weekend, and I wish I could say, but it's I think it makes it so much harder for me because I want it so much more, and I've sacrificed to be, because I want to be here. I don't mean to flex like this, but I could go and cover college football tomorrow. I'm so close to the directors and producers over there, and whenever there's holes in their schedules, they're trying to get me over there, and I could easily go stick and ball in 2 days and have a really good spot, because they appreciate the journalism in this sport. Fans, and it's not even producers or directors. I've just had to work so much harder for some reason in this sport to be seen. And I think that is because what I do is very different. And I am really bullheaded in some ways in what stories I want to tell and how I want to tell them. And sometimes it doesn't always pan out, but I'm very adamant and don't tell me what to say. I'm going to say what I want to say. And sometimes it's hurt me as far as being able to progress in this sport at times. And it hurts because when fans then, have such strong opinions about what I do or what happened or what we're even doing on Race Day Live, it sucks, because I'm sitting here thinking it could be so much easier if I just were to bow out. And I'm completely honest, these are conversations Daniel and I have in the last 3 years when I was overlooked or things happen, I was like, I don't belong here. Like I need to start going back. Like maybe I can go get a job in Texas, or maybe motocross and supercross just isn't going to receive me well. Like maybe I'm not meant for these people. But then like I look back and like my brother and my dad, and like they can enjoy this sport so much more than they would if I were covering football or baseball or golf or boat shows or just, some of the other things I do. So it's like, when I read those mean comments, I think I internalize them a little bit more than I might if I were covering football or baseball.
Sure.
Because when I do cover those sports, of course, there's always going to be mean comments. First of all, there's not as many in those sports for some reason. And then secondly, like I don't take it as personal because those people I don't know. Right. But what makes me, I think, receive it a little more personally is that like, this should be my family. Like I grew up in racing. Like, why don't they receive me well? Like, why don't they like me? Like I'm their person. Like, do they not realize like I consider them family? Like I want to do a good job for them. That's why I'm here. So I think sometimes like I internalize it more than I should, but I'm getting better at it. So I'm getting better I think, at not taking it personal.
Well, one, maybe people hearing that, because look, nobody says that. Like, not, I'm sure that's how Daniel, and honestly, people shit all over Ricky for the first couple of years, and he's gotten better. He wasn't bad. Some people would say he was. I don't think he was bad, but that is like the greatest of all time. People idolize him. The same guy that would get a selfie with him and ask for his autograph was the same guy that was shitting all over him on Twitter and Instagram. Right. And I've realized just
Vital's the worst.
Yeah, dude. I don't even go on. That's what's unique about our sport is, as a fan, like I don't, this podcast is a hobby. My business, we own an ad agency and we do work in Moto. So I have friends that are fans of riders and athletes and business figures that we work with, and those same people will shit on and talk trash on someone like you, but then if they ever get a chance to meet you, they're going to come up and ask for a selfie. It's a very weird makeup of our fans, to where like I guess the easiest way to put it, I genuinely don't think they dislike the people that they talk trash on. I think that they are protected. They're the keyboard warrior effect, and they just like to bitch, but then they're a fan of that person. Because again, I've seen it with Ricky. It's very weird to me, and I think it's unique to our sport, maybe a few sports, but I appreciate your work, and I know a lot of people do, and hopefully you kind of telling your story will open the eyes up that like, hey, this isn't a chick that just walked in and said, hey, I'm here, can I, get a job? Like, you've really busted your ass, as has everybody that's been on this show, but most of the people on the show are not publicly in the light like you and Daniel and Ricky and all these guys are. So, yeah, I appreciate the effort and everything you guys are doing for sure.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate being able to kind of air that out, because it does suck. Like it sucks like putting so much into a show and then going and reading those things. But I'm getting better. I don't go on Vital anymore. So
yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I can't believe you ever went on Vital to begin with.
I did, dude. After every show, I was going on Vital because I'm like, what are the storylines? Like, what are they saying? Like, did they like this?
Yeah. I see. Yeah. Vital's an interesting place. All right. As we kind of wrap up, I'm curious to hear who, if anybody, or maybe there's multiple people, do you really look up to as far as they're doing some unique things in the sport or in the industry that you're in that, maybe motivate you and inspire you, or that, you aspire to be like one day with your career? Because you're clearly in an upward trajectory. Who's somebody that maybe gets you up in the morning and you're just like loving what they're doing?
Thank you. That's a great question. There's a lot of women in sports that I think do a very good job. Jamie Erdahl for CBS is phenomenal. She does a lot of football for them, and she does basketball. I've always looked up to her sit-down interviews. I know it's kind of cliche. I love Erin Andrews. I know that's hot topic. People hate Erin Andrews, but she does a great job with NFL. In 4 questions, you can get the gist of any player that she sits down with. I love doing the sit-down interviews, the long forms. We've done a few of those on Race Day Live this year. And I think there's such a good place for them in the sport, because you can see the riders with their helmets off. They're not in race mode. They're not super tense. We kind of get the best of them for those moments. So like when I look at other reporters who do that well, I always try to watch kind of what Erin Andrews is asking, what she's doing. I look at Jamie Erdahl. But honestly, like Daniel Blair, he's been such a good mentor to me. And like, he does everything. He's on the floor like me. Sometimes he's color, sometimes he's play-by-play. He literally does all three of these things. He's been a great mentor to me. Lee Diffie is fantastic. He unsolicited has reached out to me, been like, hey, you're doing a good job. Here's some tips and tricks. And whenever I have like questions, I'll sometimes call him and say like, hey, what do you think about this move? Or even before I accepted the Feld job, I called Lee and I asked him for his advice. And I said, what should I do? And he said, you're in a tough spot because that's kind of a horizontal move. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people in the broadcast landscape that I could look up to, but for me, it's mainly the guys like Daniel and Lee.
That's cool.
For sure.
That's cool. Nah, I love it. I love Lee. He's again, that's another example of somebody that's just great at what they do, and people would probably be like starstruck if they met him in person, but they love to just talk trash on the internet. I think Lee's awesome, and again, you guys all make such a great team. Kristen, it's been awesome to chat with you. This is the first time Kristen and I have spoken and met in person, well, over Zoom, which I guess counts as in person in a 2022 world. So I appreciate what you're doing. I love what you and the team are doing. Continue to do it, and hopefully we get to meet in person one of these days, and I look forward to just watching your continued come up and what you're going to do with your career. It's been awesome to watch so far.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the time, and it's cool to finally chat with you. So thanks.
Absolutely. All right. Well, guys, thanks for watching this episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast. Again, be sure to go to racerxonline.com/Moto Marketing, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the Moto Marketing Podcast. If your goal is to get real, measurable results from your marketing that will grow your company revenue, then check out how Impact Media can get the same results that they have for Moto's most iconic brands by visiting thinkimpact.com. That's THINKIMPAKT.com. Have a marketing question that you want answered on the show? Send your questions to questions@motomarketingpodcast.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Moto Marketing Podcast.